Good morning. My name is not Dean Sampson, as listed in your order of service. My name is Jeff Phillip. I am on your board of trustees, and I'd like to welcome you this morning and remind you of a few things coming up soon. One is that there are still opportunities in our event sales for the next several months. So you can go back to that Sign Up Genius if you're interested in signing up for anything. There are some things coming up in the next couple of months that you can sign up for. On April 30th is our Super Supper at Eagle Harbor Congregational Church. So we could use some support. You can reach out to either myself or Mike Cox. I think Jim Morse is coordinating. Are you coordinating this coming one? I don't remember. I don't know. Somebody else is doing it. And this is also our stewardship time of year. So if you have your pledge form, if you'd like to bring that in today and drop it off, there's a treasure chest over by Tyler. Tyler marks the spot. You can find the treasure over there. Good morning and welcome.
Before our opening words, I want to invite us to take a moment to greet each other, welcome each other into this space today. So please rise, move about, feel free to say hello. Wake now my vision of ministry clear, brighten my pathway with radiance here, mingle my calling with all who will share, work towards a planet transformed by our care. As we come into this space today, may the spirit of this congregation, the ministry that we are called to work towards a planet transformed by our care, be present, be awakened within those of us gathered here, within those gathered afar online, with those who have gone before us, and in those who are yet to come. May we come into this space inspired and inspire each other. Come, let us worship together.
Thank you, Audrey. Nine years ago, in 2015, Cedars had one of our epic women's retreats at CBEC, where Alex Sanso and I partnered to lead the morning worships. I don't remember the theme of the retreat, but I do remember delivering a reflection on the beloved community and my understanding of it through the lens of Martin Luther King. On the surface, beloved community simply sounds like a group, congregation, society, or fellowship of people with shared goals and deep bonds. That's a good general description of the concept. As it turns out, and as many UUs know, the origin story of beloved community is much more in-depth and has evolved for me in the past decade since I shared my thoughts and interpretation of beloved community at CBEC. My initial takeaway from reading up on King's speeches was that the beloved community meant the goal of creating the kingdom of heaven here on earth, rather than simply living a life of discipline and good works with the ultimate goal of earning a spot in heaven on the other side of those pearly gates taught about in summer Bible camp, if you're lucky enough to be one of those attendees. Martin Luther King had a very specific and hopeful and ambitious goal for his beloved community. This statement is from the King Center. Dr. King's beloved community is a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because international standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. This statement intentionally leaves out politics and economics because, in the words of King, I do not think of political power as an end. Neither do I think of economic power as an end. They are ingredients in the objective that we seek in life. And I think that end or that objective is a truly brotherly society, the creation of beloved community. As we all stand here in this moment in time, in a deeply polarized society, it does us good to remind ourselves that a goal of a global community where all people are interconnected, interdependent, and living in harmony is a dream of possibility, and that has been placed in front of humanity for many generations, long before King articulated it so eloquently in the late 50s and 60s. In recent years, it feels like we have taken several large steps back from the vision of beloved community as defined by King. Desegregation in the 50s and 60s with the hope of racial integration was a good start. But according to ethics writer and UU minister Joan Johnson Lewis, integration came to mean simply ending the legal ways that segregation is enforced, or even more pervasively, letting people of color choose to participate in the white world, jobs, housing, education, arts, religion, etc. But that version of integration keeps whiteness, white culture, the supreme goal and end, letting people of color participate in what remains a world in which white people are the default and are largely those in charge. Dr. King knew that the goal of social change is not tolerance alone, or even the recognition or enforcement of human or civil rights, or an improved economic condition. These are necessary but not sufficient steps in the path to human progress. We cannot rest until we have bridged the divides of prejudice and mistrust that lie within the human head and heart. Invariably, these final resilient divisions are social and personal. Dr. King reminds us that reconciliation is both a process and a final destination. The road to the beloved community is the difficult road of reconciliation among people who have been in conflict and negotiation. The beloved community is reconciliation achieved, a profound human connectedness, a transcendent harmony and love among all people. I pulled these quotes about integration from an article written in 2023, and it's clear that the writer believes we have a long way to go before we truly merge all races, cultures, and economic statuses into an interconnected, peaceful world. The war being waged from the right against the LGBTQ community, against immigrants, against people of color, against any person who identifies as a woman, who has a uterus, and any group that doesn't fit a narrow description of patriot, is a war that will most definitely be lost. This war will not last. But how long must we continue to fight for hard-won rights that feel like they might just slip through our fingers? I, for one, was not anticipating this moment in time being so polarized and combative when we were building our nest egg and raising our children. What does give me hope, however, is that I do believe in cycles and the long game. I'm a patient person. And despite the unique hold that the far right wing has on almost half of this country right now, balance will eventually be restored. I'm generalizing here, but the right-wing fanaticism and the bizarre devolving of the Republican Party and its residual outcomes and after effects will cycle out. They are long-term unsustainable. It will take 20 years, but this strange cycle will end and turn into another cycle of more balance. So, in times like this, it does us good to think and hear about beloved community in whatever context it resonates for you. It's real, it's possible, and until our gigantic global village can reach that state, we have our smaller beloved communities, like this group right here, in this room, to keep us filled with faith, hope, and optimism for the next generation. My understanding of beloved community has evolved and deepened since that women's retreat a decade ago, and will continue to deepen as we make our way through the next several years of moving toward a country and a world that affirms that we do not have to think alike to love alike. According to bell hooks, beloved community is formed not by the eradication of difference, but by its affirmation, by each of us claiming that the identities and cultural legacies that shape who we are and how we live in the world. I dedicate the lighting of the chalice to beloved communities, large and small, real and here, right now, and the ones we aspire to create in the future. Please join me in reciting the affirmation which is printed in your order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. There is a slight change in the order of service. The hymn that we're singing this morning is number 347, Gather the Spirit. And we will be led by Robin Teskey. Thank you, Robin.
We'll sing all three verses of this. Yeah, take it away, Audrey.
So I was telling Gregory and Arlene before the service that this has like an old-timey, like revival vibe this morning with the lights. I'm kind of liking it. We have our forest. You had to make your way in here. It's a perfect place to gather. So I have a creation story to share with all of you today. I really love creation stories because there are so many of them, and they kind of just are fun to think of all the different ways we arrived here, both as a species and just in general. Where did we come from? I think of the book of Genesis account. You know, God creates the world in 7 days, and it's actually kind of confusing because there are two creation accounts in the book of Genesis that slightly contradict each other. But that's not the story I want to share. This is a story titled The Everything Seed by Carol Martinagasho. I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. It's in your order of service. Please correct me afterward. But this is a story. It was written by a Unitarian Universalist in an attempt to explain a very complex philosophy known as process theology. We'll talk more about that later. But this is the everything seed. Have you ever watched a seed grow? Have you ever noticed how it begins? So small, so still, so quiet, like a gift waiting to be opened, and how slowly it wakes up, begins to unfold, growing into something larger, growing into something larger and larger and larger. Then you know that whatever comes from the seed usually ends up looking very little like the seed it came from, which is also true of the very first seed. Once, long ago, way back before the beginning of time, so long ago there wasn't even actually a thing called time because there was no one there to count it. Everywhere was huge, deep, mysterious. It was a place like something was waiting to happen. There were no stars, no moon or sun. There was no place like Earth, not a drop of water or a single tree or rock or flower, and no living beings anywhere. But in that deep, waiting space was hidden the tiniest point of something no bigger than a seed. It was not a flower seed. It was not an elm tree seed. It was not a seed of corn, although all of those things were included in this seed. You might call it an everything seed, because that is what it became. No one knows where the first seed came from. No one knows how it was planted or how it knew in the way that only seeds seem to know how long to wait for just the right moment to sprout and grow. But all at once, this tiny seed, cradled and nourished in the rich soil of space, woke up, broke open, and began to unfold. Unfolding and blossoming forth into an enormous, blazing ball of bright light like a great grandmother's sun. And the universe was born. Out fluttered the galaxies like a storm of snowflakes, swirling and gathering into the brightest and blindingly beautiful cloud of stars. And out of those star clouds whirled our own star, the one we call the sun, and our earth, and our moon, and all the round spinning planets we have learned how to name. And this is the secret of that tiny seed. You and I were there in the very beginning. Just an idea, for each leaf on a big oak tree lies hidden inside of an acorn. We were there with all the stars and planets and rocks and oceans, plants and animals and people. Everything that is now, ever was, or ever will be, was inside that first seed. So whenever you hold a seed in your hand and wonder what it could become, imagine how you and all that is here once came from the tiniest speck of an everything seed before it sprouted and it grew long, long ago in the way back beginning of time. Now, if this were an ordinary story, it would end right here. But this is the story of the universe, a story that keeps unfolding. What once began in a blazing blossom of light continues every day. New stars sprout open in deep soil of space. New plants and animals appear and disappear on Earth. Seeds of many kind are scattered everywhere to help us remember. And new people are born every day with the spark of that first light still alive and burning deep inside, waiting, like the everything seed, to shine in ways that are yet to be known. And that is our story. I want to invite you to take a breath. To calm yourself in this moment. Relax in whatever way feels most comfortable. And join me now in a moment of collective silence. Spirit of life, spirit of mystery that arose from that first silence. Be with us today as a manifestation of the connection that we share with each other, the connection to ourselves and the world beyond us. Many of us come into this space with our hearts heavy. May those burdens we carry be held with tenderness. May we also share in the joys, the jubilations and triumphs that we each bring to this space. May we continue to be inspired to work for justice, to center love in our lives, and to see ourselves as part of the greater whole, that interdependent web of life that we have been part of since that very first seed began to sprout. May this be our prayer in this time and in the days ahead. Amen.
Each Sunday, we set aside time to share our joys and our sorrows. so that we can help you hold space for them. If you do have a joy or a sorrow today, please come forward, share your name, and share in a couple of brief sentences your joy or your sorrow, and place a stone in the water for your sorrow, or in a little water in the bowl for your joy. As a reminder, this part of the service is neither recorded or live streamed.
Yes, there is more love somewhere. Thank you. I'm forgetful today. I left my notes for the songs at home, but I kind of remember the background of this. Apparently, the first recording of this song was done in the 30s, around 1937, by Alan Lomax. In his living room, he recorded Bessie Jones singing this song, and I heard it. It is on YouTube if you want to hear her version. It's a little more upbeat than other versions I've heard, and I kind of like that. She made it a song of hope rather than sorrow. So we'll sing all 4 verses. And Audrey's ready.
So
We pass the offering baskets each week at Cedars as a reminder that the offering is symbolic as well as practical. We know that it is through pledges that we build our budget and fund our yearly programs and ministry of worship, pay our staff, and finance the comfort and beauty of our worship space. We know that we could easily submit those pledge checks to the church at any convenient time, but we pass the plate during our worship service to make a community expression of thanks for the blessing of abundance, to visibly bring in the harvest at this most cherished hour of our week. Our offering says that the act of giving is as essential to our spiritual well-being as anything else we do here on Sunday mornings. If you are visiting us for the first time, please let the basket pass you by. We are simply happy to have you here with us today. Will the ushers please come forward for the offering? Thank you for your very generous gifts.
There's a song by an artist that I have been following for years, no relation to my husband, named William Elliott Whitmore. He's from Iowa and sings a lot of sort of folk rock type songs. But there's this one song that I just love the way it starts. It's, let's do something impossible. Let's do something grand. Let's bet it all on one horse. We're not going to go on, and we're not going to bet. But let's do something impossible. I got to spend some time recently with my colleague, many of you know, Deanna Vandeveer, who lives here on the island but works remotely for the UU Service Committee. And we were watching a lecture series that's coming out, the Men's Lecture. If you're familiar, it's been going on since the 1940s. It was, the lecture continues because of a bequest of the Men's family. And it explores many different issues. But this year, the lecture is exploring Unitarian and Universalist histories with prison abolition. Very interesting topic, and turns out we have a lot of rich historic research resources in this area to mine. But one of the things that in this conversation is similar to our Universalist ancestors of the 19th century who were advocating at the time for complete prison abolition, and people who are advocating for similar abolition today. There seems to be a recognition that what is being advocated for is, in all likelihood, impossible. There's a lot of complex reasons, but it seems like an insurmountable task, an impossible task. And yet, people for centuries now have chosen to engage in this impossible work. I think that there's a great value in us striving for things that maybe seem impossible, maybe even a little bit silly. When you think of an impossible thing that we try to do as a church community, and I think in our lives around, in our relationships with family and friends, an impossible task many of us have taken on is the work of building beloved community. The work of building beloved community. I know Nancy used that word earlier, and It's a word, it's been around for a little while. The phrase beloved community first entered usage in the 20th century. It was coined by a philosopher and theologian named Josiah Royce. Royce was actually an Anglican, but was very influential on many liberal theologians of his time, many people who would later become known as process thinkers. Royce himself, though, founded what was a school of theology that was known as American idealism, or sometimes it's known as objective idealism. And I'm going to call it objective idealism because it seems less nationalistic. Objective idealism differed from some of the other popular philosophical points of view of Royce's time. There were kind of two main views during this early part of the 20th century, the first quarter, I think-ish. The first was the philosophy of physical materialism. It was sort of this view that the external world existed entirely separate from any observation or mental processes, that it was just a collection of physical things. Taken to the extreme, it was often explained that consciousness, our ability to think, was simply a result of physical means. There was nothing more beyond that. The second popular philosophy of Royce's time was a philosophy known as subjective idealism. Subjective idealism, contrary to the physical materialism, said that everything was a construction of the mind, that everything was dependent upon the subjective observer, that we are creating reality, or God observing is creating reality. But there was a subjectivity to it. The physical world in this view was really of no consequence and may not even really exist. Those two views stood in competing tension with one another in many very boring academic circles. And that's where Royce came in. Royce asserted his view of objective idealism. It was a view in which both the subjective observation of the individual and the material realities of the world interacted to create existence. That we are shaped by the material circumstances of life, but also in turn can shape the material circumstances of life. I think some of this has started to kind of be explored as we think about what physicists are working on now, observing strange action of different particles, realizing how our observation of photons changes whether they are a particle or a wave. The way our observation changes the physical world. Royce, when he proposed this theory, though, it was revolutionary. And he said that it was a view in which our material existence and our intellectual life were essential to each other. Royce's objective idealism was a sort of middle path, a middle point between rational materialism and subjective idealism. To understand this a little better, here's a quote from actually a 2020 philosophy article by Frederick Baser. He writes, "The objective idealists taught that the ideal involved a necessary reference to rational or archetypals, regardless of the existence of the self-conscious subject. The entire world, whether we experience it or not, is a manifestation or appearance of reason." It's complicated. In simpler terms, objective idealism was the view that mental or spiritual world does exist as does the physical world, and that the two dimensions are intimately related and inseparable from one another. This is an idea that goes back many millennia, actually, back to Plato and his idea of perfect forms, that there was this ideal that existed, and here is a projection of that ideal that we perceive. This understanding of the world proved to be influential on another popular thinker of Royce's time, a man by the name of Albert Whitehead. Whitehead held that to be is to be uniquely related to a whole. To be is to be uniquely related to a whole. We talk about interdependence, that we are ourselves, but in a unique relationship to a larger web of life. For Whitehead, reality was a process rather than simply a material object. Life was not just bits of matter, as he put it, but rather both matter and consciousness unfolding through time together. And this understanding, the creative force, or what Whitehead liked to call God, is the great companion and fellow sufferer who understands. That is, God is in a relationship. And if you don't like that word, the force of creation, whatever it is in a unique, unfolding relationship with each of us, with the whole of creation in every moment. For process theologians like Whitehead and objective idealists like Josiah Royce, advocacy for coalition building and consciousness raising became of central importance. To quote another saying from Whitehead, he talked about the importance of us coming together. He believed that the many become one and are increased by one. There's power in us coming together, and that when we come together and we unite in that unfolding, when we move in that unfolding together, we are taking part in creation. Whereas sometimes I like to just simply say, we're better together. We're better together. There is something about us coming together in the way that we do that unfolding. Both of these strains of process thought, process theology and objective realism, idealism, please, it's objective idealism, are relevant to us as Unitarian Universalists because, as I said, they have informed much of the liberal theology that we draw on today. I think of people, and we've considered James Luther Adams, who is considered to be one of the great UU theologians of the past century, who was deeply inspired by both of these thinkers. Or thinking back to our own legacy as a movement in the civil rights era, a time when the language of beloved community first proposed by Royce was brought into popular conversation by Martin Luther King Jr. In his time, King said that the work of building beloved community rests in dismantling the forces of poverty, racism, and militarism, a trifecta of forces that King referred to as the triple evils. The Poor People's Campaign that some of us went to the exhibit a few weeks ago, who continues the work of MLK's vision of building beloved community, has added to this trifecta and now includes climate catastrophe as one of the forces that we need to face in order to build beloved community. In his time, King said that this work was not ever going to be done. It was impossible work that would always be unfolding as long as some people were left out of the discourse. As long as society has social margins, beloved community is not yet built. Some Unitarian Universalist thought leaders today, people who have been involved in a lot of racial justice work within our association, have talked about a Unitarian Universalist view of beloved community, saying that beloved community happens when people of diverse racial, ethnic, educational, class, gender, abilities, sexual orientations, identities come together in an interdependent relationship of love, mutual respect, and care that seeks to realize justice within community and the broader world. In the vision of beloved community as it was proposed and brought into faith communities and social movements, it was never understood that in this community we are building there will be no conflict, that we won't have disagreements or arguments, but rather we will engage those conflicts, those disagreements and arguments with mutual respect. What a vision for a world. A place where, as the book of Isaiah says, the wolf will lie down with the lamb, the leopard will lie with the goat, the calf and the lion and the yearling together, and the little children will lead them. And yet, despite this understanding of beloved community, I think at times we think that we already are there. That what we are doing is already beloved community. And it's not to say it's not beloved. It's not to say we don't love it and it's not meaningful. But beloved community is a process that is still unfolding. The story of our universe is still unfolding. And while I do not believe that beloved community is something that we can pull off yet, I still believe that it's important that we move in that direction. No matter how far off and impossible it might seem, there is great power and potential in chasing after this idea. Call it a dream. Call it some far-off aspiration. I think I'd like to call it faith. I'd like to call it faith. That pursuing something that is impossible for us here now, maybe over time, will lead us to that place we want to be. For thinkers like Royce and Whitehead, it's at this point of impossibility that God, that creative force, comes in. For these thinkers, it wasn't God the Father or God the Son, though many of them were deeply rooted in Christian theology. This is more of God, that Holy Spirit, that force that somehow emanates, creates, sustains, upholds again and again. I think one of the ways that Albert Whitehead often described this particular force was as a lure, like a fishing lure, that thing that is pulling us forward that we are chasing after. And I was thinking about this. The example for me is in the morning when I love to play fetch with my little wire hair rat dog, Henry. And he brings his toy and I throw it. And in that moment, he's chasing after it. That's what God is for the process theologian. This lure that draws us towards something good, something joyful, something that deepens our sense of wholeness. We are building beloved community. We are striving to become beloved community. We are moving in the direction of beloved community, but we aren't quite there yet. To the glory of life. I want to invite us to rise as you are willing and able as we prepare to sing our closing hymn of the morning. And I know it's a different tune, but it's not as hard as it sounds. It's hymn number 315, This Old World.
Please repeat after me as we extinguish our flaming chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth.
The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
I invite you to sing and call and response with me. Courage, my friends, you do not go alone. You do not go alone. We will be with you to sing the journey home. To sing the journey home. Our service this day has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. May the time we have spent together have planted a seed within us that will continue to unfold, connecting us to the larger whole. May it be so.